Willie, what an episode. We are talking this week about Chapter 13, The Jedi. Let's just dive right in, Willie. I'm Brian, this is Willie, and this is M.A.N.D.O. Let's just jump right in. Willie, what was your favorite part? Although, again, I think I have it pegged.
Ooh, my favorite part was one shot of Ahsoka when she was, I think it was when she was hunting everyone outside the castle, and she was behind them, and just her lightsaber lights up her face, and it was just yeah, that's what I'm all about.
So Ahsoka Tano is in the show. What was your reaction to? I mean, I think that when we talked last, we kind of both thought that she would be teased out a little bit and that we would build up to it, but she's in the cold open. Like we just went right in on it. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, this is a huge moment for a litany of reasons. No more so than this is, a fan favorite character that I think really cemented a lot of people's belief in the Clone Wars cartoon show. And then obviously she went on to play a role in Rebels as well. And then now, it makes a lot more sense, as we talked about, why Clone Wars got an extra season that focused on Mandalore and Ahsoka. But yes, I mean, so this was a big deal, her jumping into live action. It's a big deal just in terms of, I think it's fair to say that for most of its run, the Star Wars cartoon shows haven't necessarily been treated, I don't want to say as seriously as everything else, but I think for a lot of people, they were this version of lesser Star Wars, which is absolutely not the case when they are the better versions of Star Wars. But this is I do think this is going to be one of those moments that people are going to look back on and be like, this is where Star Wars really turned a corner in terms of its world building, in terms of, anything's really fair game. And, someone can pop up in one show and then pop up in another show and then have a spinoff movie, and the live action cartoon boundaries really aren't important anymore. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
It is a huge deal. To quote Darth Vader, the man himself, the circle is now complete. And it just seems like this has been in the works for quite some time. I don't know if this was the initial conception of the show or if Filoni just talked Favreau into doing this. But either way, Ahsoka Tano is in live action with her purified white-bladed lightsabers. We are full steam ahead. My favorite part, which might surprise you, my favorite part was not something that we're going to talk about in a second, but my favorite part was actually, as a new dad, it was having Din hold the child as he slept on the Razor Crest right before he thought he was going to have to give him up. So that really got me, and I really thought that was, I think I've said this a couple times, one of my favorite threads of this season is Din becoming a father and accepting that role. So I really was all in on that. But also, let's jump into this. The child has a name.
I forgot.
It's Grogu.
I was gonna say Gunk. I was close.
It's a bit of a silly name, and I want to talk more about it later, but I just want to say that I have a theory that perhaps that name will not stick around long. And my theory on that is that as this new father, as this new chapter of the child's life, perhaps Din will give Grogu a new name, since they're the clan of two. So I'm gonna put a pin in that, and then we'll see if that comes to fruition or if Grogu is Grogu. What surprised you about this episode?
So I knew I had it spoiled for me that Ahsoka was going to be in this episode, which I think we talked about. At this point, I had essentially given up until the finale. I really thought she was gonna be a finale reveal. I didn't think we'd get to see as much of her as we did. I mean, she really dominated the whole episode. But you know what surprised me was probably something you were really excited about, and I was equally excited about as well. I legitimately audibly gasped at this screen. We knew that Ahsoka was looking for somebody. We didn't know who Ahsoka was looking for, and then she name drops General Thrawn. Ooh, and yeah,
When the Thrawn name drop happened, I think I also did. I don't know. I'm just like I'm at like another level that we're gonna get a live action Thrawn, and you know, here's wishful thinking that it's gonna be Cumberbatch because it's just what I've always wanted. I think the fans might want that. Maybe I'm on an island on that one. I feel like that's kind of a fan thing. But yeah, so that was my big surprise. Is I absolutely did not expect Ahsoka Tano to say, "Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?" and just like we're in on it. I do now. I'm a little. I'm going to save it. We're going to get to it later. I'm going to save my thoughts about this Thrawn thing because I'm as much as I love. So right under Rebo for me is Thrawn. I really like characters that are blue apparently in Star Wars. So I am so excited, but I'm hesitant to be as excited as I think I could be. We're going to get into that. But aside from Thrawn, my surprising thing was again. Going back to Grogu, is that we're just giving the child a name, and we're also giving him a backstory. Now, the backstory that Ahsoka lays out is that the child was at the Jedi Temple being trained by multiple masters, and then someone saved him from the temple as the Republic fell. So, I'm going to bring back an old theory that we discussed. Perhaps it was a bloodied and beaten Mace Windu that rescues Grogu from the Jedi Temple. Now, that's a far-fetched theory, but I think it could come back in a way. So I'm just going to leave that there. What was your reaction to the child getting a name and a backstory in the same episode as we got a Thrawn name drop and Ahsoka?
Yeah, I mean the name. I don't know. I mean, I think the name's silly, but I don't know. Part of me kind of feels like they were like, no matter what we name it at this point, people aren't gonna be happy, so we might as well be totally bonkers with it.
Yeah.
The backstory to me, I bought it. I didn't love it as a backstory. It makes sense, and I mean, in a universe where Maul falls down a chasm and comes back, like I'll allow it. But I think it's right on the edge of like it's kind of right on the edge of retconning. Like we never. There's nothing that says we saw every single Jedi youngling being trained.
Right.
But I mean, it's previously established that Anakin killed them all. Again, like I said, not that Star Wars contradicts itself all the time with this stuff. So I think it's fine. It's borderline questionable for me, but I also feel like it might be as good as they could have done. That on the other hand, however, though, I would have been perfectly fine with his backstory having nothing to do with the Republic and just being he's a random force sensitive child, and not doing that now. The more and more that I think of it, means that they're probably going to do something with someone that he knows.
Someone that I totally agree. I wanted him to just be a child, a baby. 50 years old, fine, but like just kind of thrown into the mix of this world. So to have him, be trained in the temple, so like they're clearly setting something up. So Mace is our pie in the sky, but Ahsoka also mentions that after the fall of the Republic, there is a time where the child's memory goes dark when I think they're implying, or if she said this outright, I'm forgetting already, but that he might have been in the hands of the Empire previously before, kind of during the original trilogy. With that being said, if you try to put, I'm trying to put all of the pieces together.
Yeah.
So we have Dr. Pershing doing the experiments, creating Moff Gideon's dark troopers, or force troopers, whatever it is. Now, Dr. Pershing, if you remember, has that patch that looks very similar to the patches that the Boba Fett, the clone troopers were wearing on Kamino. So again, Dr. Pershing, possibly a Kaminoan cloner. So he's using the child's blood to create the dark troopers. However, if he had the child in the OT trilogy, does that mean that Palpatine was in the mix and was aware and was the one that had the child and is tasking Gideon and Pershing with making those clone bodies for himself / Snoke to jump into should anything happen to him? So I'm wondering if our necromancer idea is not far off. At this point, I think any crazy idea that we've had or anybody has had at this point is fair game. So I'm wondering if there are elements of the child's backstory, as you said, I think correctly, that they wouldn't have just given him that backstory if they weren't seeding something.
Yeah. And I mean, Filoni directed this episode.
Mm-hmm.
There is no one at this point that I trust more with Star Wars than him.
Yeah, I mean, we really do have to put our faith in him for sure. Speaking of Filoni and our faith, anything that while watching this episode that you didn't care for?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this episode, as strong as it was, cemented for me what I think is going to be the ultimate weakness of The Mandalorian as a show. And, I've kind of talked about this week to week, but it's really, and this episode I think even cements it even more for me. I don't know if we see Ahsoka the rest of the season. And that I think The Mandalorian is shaping up to be this Star Wars show that launches 1,000 other shows. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. But I mean, if you look at if you look at the Mandalore arc, Ahsoka's arc with Thrawn, his arc, like, I don't think these all get tied up within the course of the Mandalorian TV show. And I think we're seeing that, this show is really about him week to week, teaming up with new people, finding new people to give him a new mission, to upgrade his armor and get new weapons.
It's extremely video gamey. I mean, if you just track this season, so he started off needing to find a Mandalorian, which will lead him to a Jedi so that he can bring the child there. And that was, episode 1 brought him to Tatooine because there was possibly a Mandalorian there. Well, it was just a guy in armor who then someone on Tatooine said, well, there might be a Mandalorian at this water planet. And then there will be a Jedi at this planet. And then Ahsoka is telling Din that he has to take the child to what I'm calling Jedi Mountain. Yeah, another planet to find another Jedi to do another thing. So I think it's very video gamey in that you're exactly right. And I'm a little disappointed that that's kind of still it. Like I'm so happy that we're getting all these threads to follow, but I'm a little like, okay, but now we have to go do another thing, and it's just like it's another quest. So I'm not in love with that. One of the things, perhaps you'll feel differently about this, one of the things I really didn't like about this episode actually was the Ahsoka reveal in the cold open. Like, we just jump right into it. And I feel like, I mean, maybe you feel differently because you're such a fan. I feel like if that was a character that I was really passionate about, I would have wanted some kind of build-up. I mean, I know we already got her name dropped in the Bo-Katan episode, but they just go right. Like, I mean, it's an awesome scene. It's an awesome fight scene, but I just feel like the moment could have been weightier, could have been heavier. We could have really just like pumped the Ahsoka train all the way.
Yeah, I'm curious how people who aren't familiar with her character, react to that scene. To me, it reminds me a lot actually of what is probably, I would say, I would say it was better than this. Another very very infamous reveal scene, which also happens to be a woman with two swords, which is Michonne in The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
And it's
very similar.
it's very very similar to that, and like, but it just, and I remember from Michonne, it just sets up Michonne's character so well, and I think it does a lot of the same work here for Ahsoka. Yeah, so it the best opening scene that they ever could have done for Ahsoka? No, but also at this point, like, I don't know, maybe it was just better for them to just
Jump right in.
do her in the, yeah, jump right in and go for it. But I
Yeah.
still, I think given everything around her character and how passionate her fans are, and I mean how particular too, I think this is pretty close to the best they probably could have done.
Yeah.
So,
And are you in on Rosario Dawson?
I'm tentatively in.
Okay.
I'm tentatively in. I think she also got caught up with being a shitty person. We talked about that with
Oh, did she?
I don't know.
That.
We
talked about that with Cara Dune.
With Cara Dune, yeah. But so I think, and so I had actually read some reactions to her performance before I saw the episode because I kept forgetting to get off Twitter. But I think she did some things really really well. There were some moments that I was like, like, I don't know if that's like perfectly Ahsoka, but like she had some of the small moments down really well. Like just some of her, like, yeah, I mean,
the lightsaber pull of the two, that specific Ahsoka move was amazing.
Like that was great. And then like there were a couple moments where like she just kind of like thought and smiled, and I was like, there's Ahsoka. And I mean, and so it's also interesting because obviously there's years of growth from the last time we've seen Ahsoka. So she is going to be slightly different, and I think she was able to portray an older, I almost want to say more disillusioned version of Ahsoka, which I thought she also did really well. So I'm tentatively in. Two things I do want. Well, I guess it's one big thing that I do think is interesting though, is that she doesn't distinctively refer to herself not as a Jedi.
Yes.
But anytime anyone refers to her as a Jedi, she doesn't correct them, which is very, very different from any of the last points we've seen Ahsoka.
Agreed. I had that note also, is that she does not correct, I'm not a Jedi. I mean, she has her white-bladed lightsaber, so it really... There's actually a moment when Din calls them laser swords, and she gives kind of this smirk, and I'm like, is she going to correct him and tell him what they are? And she doesn't. And I'm like, I wonder if she is just very reserved and doesn't want to give away too much.
Which, I mean,
so,
fits, given she's one of the... I mean, unless we keep finding Baby Yodas everywhere, she's one of the only Jedi to survive. Like, and now not only has she survived the Clone Wars, but she survived the Empire.
Yeah.
Somehow. So yeah, it's interesting.
And interesting that she chooses to not train Baby Yoda out of the reason she gives is that there's too much fear in him, and that she doesn't want to see him go down the same path that she's hinting at, obviously, as what Anakin did. And it gets into one of my big problems with Disney Star Wars, and it's the issue of avoidance. is I feel like a lot of Disney Star Wars characters are faced with an issue, and instead of tackling the issue, they avoid the issue. That is a larger conversation that I want us to have at a separate time. So I'm gonna put another pin in that. I want to jump to some of the other things that you said. So I had a note here when I was watching the episode. Is Willie 100% right on spin-off generator? Because when they initially went with Thrawn, I was like, is this too much too soon? Like, are we getting like Bo-Katan, Mandalore, Darksaber, Ahsoka, Thrawn? Is it too much too soon? And then I remembered your point about the spin-offs, and I'm like, oh no, this is just to see the Ahsoka show. And that's going to be her going after Thrawn and possibly Ezra. So I'm there, and like, to another one of your points is this is a very Marvel Cinematic Universe thing to do, to mention a character by name, but not seeing something that they did a lot. So it's very interesting that that happened. So I'm okay with it being. I'm okay. I don't think it's too much too soon. What were some of the little moments that you liked, or just other things in this episode that you liked? I know there was a ton to like about this episode.
So I think two things I specifically want to mention. Again, not just tonally and visually, but another very, very dark episode.
Yes.
We have prisoners being electrocuted, hung up outside this palace. And then, one other thing that I noted that I also really, really liked, which I'm sure some people picked up on, was I really liked that it was Ahsoka and the main villain. I didn't catch her name, I just really enjoyed that it was them two fighting while the two men just waited outside.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really cool like reversal, of normally just having let go have the men take care of it and the women will just sit outside with the children or something. Mando's outside. Well, he doesn't have the kid at that moment, but Mando's outside, and the two dudes are just shooting the breeze as Ahsoka's in getting shit done.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really good moment. Yeah.
I actually had Mando Shootout or non-shootout. I mean, it ended up being awesome, but I had that moment also. I really enjoyed that because that also had a more Western feel, obviously.
Yeah.
The shootout itself, and I think that they were smart too, as much as the lore and Star Wars insanity they were putting in this episode with lightsabers and Jedi and all that, to bring it back to the Mandalorian Western roots of the show. I really liked that. Another thing I really liked, again, I already talked about the Ahsoka pull. Like, that moment was phenomenal. I liked the way the white-bladed lightsabers looked. I thought her fight with Din when she first meets him was cool.
Like,
yeah,
chopping the blades is pretty sweet.
Phenomenal. And another thing I liked, going back to what Ahsoka said about not wanting to train Grogu, is that she mentions that he's too afraid, and that his relationship with the Mandalorian is he trusts Din, but there's fear in the life that they lead. And I'm 100% here for the show being about, like, if this season is to spin off 20 different other Star Wars shows, but the show remains like, what kind of person is the Mandalorian going to be, and what kind of father is he going to be, and to figure that relationship out, and to figure out, like, are we going to keep going down this murderous, like, backstabbing bounty hunter path that is going to introduce fear and possibly the dark side into this kid's life, or are we going to figure out a better way?
Yeah.
And I really liked that, and I really hope that the show dives into that. So
yeah, I actually really liked. I was a bit disappointed when it's like, I think it fit in Ahsoka's character so well to not want to train any Jedi. And so when she was like, okay, cool, like, I'll train him if you help me with my task, I was like, ooh, like, I was all prepared to hate that. And then when she like pulls out of it, I was like, oh no, like, okay, like, this is Ahsoka. You know, it's interesting, you know, the concept of the child going and like picking for himself what he wants to do. And then, you know, maybe calling out to a Jedi, maybe not. But yeah, I think, you know, one of our fears was what was this show going to be if he gives up the child, or if, you know, is there a version of the show in seasons 3, 4 where Mando doesn't have the kid? And I think this episode pretty much straight up answered that no matter which Jedi come in, the central focus of the show is always going to be Din and the kid.
Yes.
Um, he's not gonna hand him off and go run off on other adventures, but it's also not gonna be like I said, I don't think we're gonna see Ahsoka the rest of the season. It's also not gonna be Ahsoka training Gobbledygook as a Jedi.
Yeah. and that's something that we talked about, which I was afraid of, is that like if we're adding Ahsoka in, is the show going to become the Ahsoka and Bo-Katan show? And I think you're absolutely right, is that this episode says, okay, no, you're going to get more Ahsoka, a ton more Ahsoka, we promise. But the Mandalorian is not going to be, she can just come in and out as needed, which I like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and I think we talked about this last week or the week before, where, you know, that's the one thing they can do with the Mandalorian is, since his life is so transient, is he can hop in and out of all of these other stories that are happening in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah, and you mentioned, you know, Avengers and stuff like that. I mean, Disney has struggled with Star Wars movies, but there's nothing that says they can't take Star Wars TV shows and start threading them together, you know, and lead to an Endgame type thing.
Yep.
Which it's very much, you know, it's very much looking like they're working on something like that. And I do wonder if, you know, if this was always the original plan for the Mandalorian, or if after it took off so well, like Filoni was like, hey, let me launch some other shows with the Mandalorian. Like, let's,
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
And if they do Endgame, like if they go that route, I mean, already we have a heck of a crew on the Mandalorian side. Mandalorian, Bo-Katan and her group, the Armorer and her group of Mandalorians, Ahsoka, any other Jedi that come in, and it's just like it's a pretty big roster on the side. And then if the other side is Moff Gideon and Thrawn, like pretty formidable forces.
Well, so you know, with the mention of Thrawn too, is a whole lot to talk about, because he's kind of supposed to be gone. I mean, him and Ezra.
Yeah.
And this seems to hint, at least, that Thrawn has come back and is doing something, working on something, planning something. And, you know, again, this ties into, well, does that tie into Palpatine? You know, what, I mean, there's only so many ultimate end goals that they can have when they have the buffer of this arc has to fit between Palpatine dying and, you know, Force Awakens.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think that, and this kind of transitions into our last point, is what we're looking forward. What did we notice in this episode to lead into other seasons and episodes of this season? I think I would be surprised if either Moff Gideon wasn't related to Thrawn or Palpatine, or like I would be surprised if there wasn't a connection between those three characters and one of the other ones. I don't think that if we don't get Palpatine at all, which I'm fine with, then I don't think that Thrawn is not connected to Gideon. I think that there has to be a connection at some point. I think someone has to be working for someone. Someone is pulling the strings.
Yeah.
I think the easiest answer is that Palpatine is pulling Gideon's strings and Thrawn may be out on his own, or that Thrawn is working for the Emperor and Moff Gideon is out on his own. And I that's my take on that whole situation. But on the other side of that, with Thrawn and you mentioned Ezra, when Ahsoka gives Din the new quest of going to, again, I'm calling it Jedi Mountain, who's going to show up? Ezra is in play, I think. I think Ezra's in play. If Thrawn's back, it stands to reason Ezra's back. So I think Ezra's in play. I said this before, in our first episode. I think Mace is in play. And then John mentioned this, and I shot it down immediately on our episode of Children of the Watch. And I said, you will never get that in a million years. However, after this episode, is Luke Skywalker in play?
I don't think so. I think, could they do it? Yes. I was leaning towards Obi-Wan, since we know there's an Obi-Wan show coming.
Mm-hmm.
We also can't rule out Force ghosts.
Right. Well, Obi-Wan would have to be a Force ghost. And then, so Obi-Wan, and I think Obi-Wan's shooting his show. So it's easy for Ewan McGregor to jump into a cameo. Also, as John mentioned as well, the Sebastian Stan Mark Hamill lookalike thing is very real. And he is also shooting a Disney Plus show for Falcon and Winter Soldier. So it's plausible. So my money is, I think the easiest money is on Ezra. Is that Ezra shows up, because someone's going to show up. There's no question that whether it's this season or next, when they get to Jedi Mountain and the child, whatever path the child chooses, by reaching out with the Force, that someone will come. There's no way they see that and don't do anything. I think Ezra is the top choice. And then, like I said, pie in the sky, it's Mace, and crazy balls to the wall, it's Luke Skywalker. I'm trying to think of other options of who is alive at this time, post Return of the Jedi. And
really, it's Luke and Ezra.
Right. I mean, that's all we know of that are still alive. I mean, do we get Kyle Katarn?
Here's my thought. Here's what if I reach out with the Force, this is what my gut tells me.
Okay, give it to me.
I don't think it's Ezra, because I think it's going to be someone from like the prequels, or like Luke. And so the reason I think that is because, Ahsoka's already such a big deal. Thrawn's a big deal. I do think we get Ezra at some point now. I wouldn't have said that as strongly if we didn't get the mention of Thrawn. But I think that the only way you top the return of Thrawn, Ahsoka, Ezra for general Star Wars fans is you pull in someone from the OG trilogy, or you pull in someone from the prequels. That is my thought. I also, if I were a betting man, I'd say the last episode this season is Jedi Mountain. And I could see him reaching out, and we see various Jedi, either as ghosts or, something akin to, I'm thinking of when Rey is about to strike down Palpatine and we have all the voices. Mm-hmm. Something akin to that.
But better, hopefully.
But better. And then the child chooses not to go down that path. And I think that solves the Jedi problem for the Mandalorian. I think that solves so many problems at once, that I could very, very much see that happening.
I would actually love that. And maybe then, so the child makes his choice, and then he communicates with Din that he's made his choice, and then Din's just like, okay, kid, let's go home. And then they're like, all right, let's go find out what's happening on Mandalore, because Bo-Katan says it's safe to go there. And that sets up the season 3 arc of maybe we're going to reclaim Mandalore. I think that would be awesome if they handled the Jedi problem that way. Interesting that you mentioned last episode be Jedi Mountain. I think that will be the penultimate episode. And here's why. In this episode, Din takes on the hit on Ahsoka because he wants to find her, but is offered a pure Beskar spear.
His new weapon. Yep, he got
his
his
new weapon. Also nice that Pedro Pascal, the Viper from Game of Thrones, has another spear. But a pure Beskar can deflect lightsabers. So my speculation, there's a lot of speculation in this episode. Apologies, but is that the final episode will be a fight between Gideon and Din, Darksaber versus pure Beskar spear, in which, a la Empire Strikes Back, Din will lose and the child will be taken. So I think exactly what you said about Jedi Mountain will happen, but in the penultimate episode, that they will make the choice to be like, okay, we're done with the Jedi, let's go do something else. And then that tracker that Gideon placed on the Razor Crest will activate, and they'll find him and like shoot him down, so that wounded man, the Mandalorian, will have to fight a full strength Moff Gideon and a bunch of stormtroopers and lose the fight, and the child will be taken, and that's how we're going to end season 2. That's my guess. That's why I think the spear is being added, or they're just giving him a spear so that he can fight lightsaber wielding characters from now on. But the only one so far that is on the opposite side of that is Gideon. So
yeah, it could. I mean, I think we just figured the season all out. I think we cracked it.
I think we did. I think we have our this is 5, so 6. I'm guessing episode 6 is going to be a palate cleanser, where we catch our breath and maybe check back in with Grief Karga and Cara Dune. Just be like, that was weird. Let's have a minute and maybe let's just have a fun little like small adventure, and then Jedi Mountain, and then the fight with Gideon. So I'm going to give you a quick update on, so we're not at all 3 sharks. If Luke Skywalker comes in, that's our primary character. Jumping the show is Jump the Shark, but that's fine. I'm going to give you all of the threads that we currently have. I'm going to give you this every time, every episode now. So there are still 10 threads, but there is a new wrinkle. So the only thread that is different is Ahsoka's thread, because we have now figured out what she's doing. She is on the hunt for Thrawn and possibly Ezra. Grand Admiral Thrawn is going to be in live action. I still can't wrap my head around that, but that's what's going on in the world of The Mandalorian. Overall, are you in or out on chapter 13, The Jedi?
Oh, absolutely in.
Is this your favorite episode of the series to date?
I don't know. I was thinking about that.
You don't have to pin it down yet. Top tier, at least.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think they did. Like, I was always going to be incredibly picky about Ahsoka coming into live action, and I think that by having as few complaints as I have, that they did probably as good as a realistic job as anyone could have done.
Yeah,
is my thought at the moment. So.
Yeah, I mean, on this episode, it's top tier for me. Probably, it might be 1. I still think the Heiress was phenomenal. So I'm in on this episode a lot. I really liked it. I loved seeing Ahsoka, even though I'm not the crazy super Ahsoka fan that others are. I've always liked the character, and it was very cool to see her in live action and wielding her correct size lightsabers and white. They really took great care. Obviously, Dave Filoni directed, as you mentioned. They took great care. They really respected the character, and they played her music, and it was a really, I think it was a great episode, and I'm really happy that this is where we are, that we have so many threads to follow. Dark Troopers are being made, midi-chlorians, prequel characters, sequel characters. As you said, the relevancy of this show has made all of fans like you and I who watched the animated shows like feel so loved, because they're now like here and in a top tier Star Wars that everyone is watching. Like, people are gonna know who Ahsoka Tano is now, more than just nerds.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you're going to see a lot of people going back to Clone Wars and stuff like that too, which obviously, obviously Disney wants. Disney has them all available now. This
Absolutely.
is yeah.
Well, we are 13 chapters in. It's still no Max Rebo, so the show is far from perfect for me. But hey, who knows? We got Ahsoka. We're getting Thrawn. We have no idea what else can happen. Any final thoughts?
I don't remember if I said it or not, but I would not be surprised if we don't see Ahsoka again this season.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. I would take the money bet on that, and that perhaps if our wild predictions on the end of the season is right, then maybe she will be on the crew, the recovery crew, of next season. And if not, then at least for the reclaiming of the planet Mandalore. But anyways, that is chapter 13. The Jedi Ahsoka Tano lives. Willie Clark, thank you. What a night.